The air is still at first. A dead silence that clings to frostbitten peaks. A faint rumble grows beneath the feet splintering ice. A cold breath keep creeping ever closer. Shadows shift amongst jagged cliffs. Then, with a deafening crack, the glacier erupts, revealing a towering shape of ice-covered scales and merciless eyes. A white dragon has awoken, and nothing will escape its wrath. So this week, of course, from how you can probably tell, we will be talking about the White Dragon from Dungeons & Dragons 5e. We will be breaking down how you can use it in your story, how you can use it as a NPC, and of course, how it should behave in combat. I'm your GM, Isaiah, and welcome to Game Master's Arsenal. Now, before we talk about white dragons specifically, we've got to talk about chromatic dragons. And because this is a conversation that is going to be repeated on every episode that we cover chromatic dragons on, we're going through them rather quickly. That's because there's no need to go through them too slow. They're pretty much similar. So most chromatic dragons, as opposed to their metallic and gemstone counterparts, have a few traits, being children of Tiamat, the five-headed dragon queen, and chief deity of dragonkind. Of course, she is a lesser god. We're not here to talk about Tiamat. We're here to talk about the white dragon. But her abilities have flowed into these. Not abilities, but personalities have really flowed into these. Sorry. If you see me on screen, I'm thinking while I'm going. Minute. I think with my hands. I think with my movements. If you're watching just audio, of course, you're just watching on the audio. Wherever you're at, I'm going to take this moment, hit that follow, hit that subscribe, hit that like, leave a comment. Tell me what kind of shenanigans you've gotten up to with a white dragon in your campaigns and what kind of trouble you've caused for your players, because there is a billion ways to cause trouble with them. But let's get back to our chromatic dragons. Now, chromatic dragons, of course, they have a few distinguishing personalities. First of all, they are driven by greed. They want treasure. And this aspect covers every bit of their personality. Every plan they make, every thing they do is to amass wealth, whether it be magic items, gemstones, coins, it doesn't matter. And they don't care about who they take it from. They don't want this gold for any specific reason. They don't want this gold to serve any purpose specifically. They want it because they want it. They amass wealth just because they believe it belongs to them. The best description I've heard of dragons is they are aggressive, gluttonous, and vain. Gluttonous, not necessarily in the food ways, but the way they amass treasure, the way they eat on whatever they want. They see themselves as superior. Additionally, not only driven by greed, but chromatic dragons are egotistical creatures. They believe they are superior to everything around them and the most powerful and worthy of all creatures. Of course, they only interact with other creatures to further their own interests, because why would the ant beneath me approach me? Of course, they build layers. They're centers of power, but chromatic dragons specifically build their layers to defend their hordes. Not necessarily for any specific purpose, but they choose remote locations and make it dangerous specifically to defend their hordes. I would say more on the layers, but we'll talk about them a different time, because layers are an entirely different animal. We will do a dungeon build on them later. Of course, we got to talk about the Queen of Evil Dragons a little bit. She is the queen of the chromatic dragons and is united in her hatred of Bahamut, the Platinum Dragon. Of course, Bahamut being the creator of the good metal dragons and being their lesser deity, she holds enmity for them and hates where she is when she was cast into hell, and where she was stripped of her power in hell. Now, let's talk about white dragons specifically. That's a little bit. When you're building your white dragon, you need to remember those things. Egotistical. greedy, and first and foremost, they do have a deity, a one that just wants to be freed. Now, the white dragon may not be the one to institute any of these plans. There's a reason for that. The white dragon is the smallest and least intelligent of the chromatic dragons. It is the most animalistic. You're not going to see a white dragon making genius plays out here, Machiavelliing it up. I'm not going to get onto my thoughts on Machiavelli. That should be a conversation for another time. But yeah, so these white dragons, animalistic, least intelligent. That's how you should play them. They're not the smartest of the dragons, they're not the dumbest. And when you look at their stats, you'll kind of understand that. Primal and vengeful is their thing. Now, they're not the most intelligent creature, but they know when they've been slighted. And when a white dragon has been slighted, it stops at nothing to get its revenge. Even recognizing enemies after, or recognizing the bloodlines of their enemies after. They have this hatred of anybody that wrongs them. And it's like, okay, that leads into the animals. You steal from their horde, they will never stop hunting you. Unlike some other dragons who will work with other groups, white dragons work alone. White dragons avoid each other, even other white dragons, other than for mating purposes. But they avoid other dragons. Although, due to their territory, they often come into contact with silver dragons, which they hate because they share it. And have bitter vendettas around them, killing their rivals when they can. Now, how they keep their treasures under ice. And that goes more into dungeon building, and we'll talk about that later, because this is just how they keep their hoard and how they keep their food good for them. Now, the thing is, white dragons, like I said, they're animalistic, which is the easiest to run. When you're building out a white dragon encounter, this is the kind of dragon that I'm fine with a white dragon being in a random encounter, because I talk about how dragons are always big in stories, how you cannot have a dragon be not important in a story, but I'm like, a white dragon doesn't have to be important. It can be a random road encounter. You just accidentally crossed into its territory and it's attacking like an animal, that kind of thing. They're not the smartest. They have moderate intelligence, but when you're comparing it to the other dragons, it's like, oh no, not even close. When you're using them, when you're building an NPC, you got to remember this. They don't want to interact with people. White dragon, let's talk about building the NPCs. I said that's what we'd be talking about, and we're going to talk about it. So white dragons do not want to interact with other things. They're isolationists. They're animals. They don't want to interact with things that are lesser than them. They're lesser than them. They rarely talk to anything else, which means, good thing enough, your NPC doesn't need to talk much. And I actually encourage you not to talk to them much. One of the personality traits I've seen recommended for white dragons is the people that talk too much are dangerous. Eat them first. And so you can deal with these creatures. Rarely you can deal with these creatures, but you can. They have been known to have servants in the form of kobolds and other weaker creatures. Things that the dragon sees as a bit too difficult to kill, but not worth it to kill because they're too strong that either hurt him and it's just not worth his time, or they're so far beyond him that they can't. So those are the two opportunities when you would speak to a white dragon. You're either too weak or too strong. A white dragon will not converse with somebody on the same level as them. Now, as far as the weak side is subservience. Bring it food. Bring it treasure. That kind of thing. Serve it. That's easy. NPC, big bad behind the kobolds and attacking the little village in the north. On the other hand, white dragons have been known to be mounts. If you can strike a white dragon and force its submission, prove that you are stronger than it, oftentimes it will become subservient. Like I said, it is the most animalistic. It looks for strength. And because it looks for strength, when it finds that strength, it will oftentimes go for it and become helpful. I just think that as an NPC, the less is more with this dragon. This dragon should be the villain that you guys are trying to figure out. Where is it? Why is it hunting us? It should be the hunter in the dark. It shouldn't talk to the players. Maybe it'll mock them a little bit. Maybe it'll talk about how delicious their friends were once it's killed them. But it will not converse with them like some other dragons, and which is disappointing. I like the idea that dragons would talk to people. This creates this monster dragon that the knights go out and defeat. Of course, its territory is the winter. And we'll talk about that when we talk about their layers. Which means there's not a lot of story importance here. When you're dealing with a white dragon, there's a few options there, and many more. I'm just talking about a few easy ones that you can do. The white dragon is attacking a village. Its run attacks on and on, but somebody in the town has recently stolen from it. And so the dragon has blamed the entire town. Of course, this dragon then went to sleep for a while, woke back up, and has decided to ransack the town. Or it hasn't had time, so it's finally able to ransack the town. Now the players either have to defend the town or hunt the dragon. Another option for that quest, of course, would be like, hey, who stole from it? Okay, we hand them over to the dragon. That's more of your morally gray evil route kind of stuff. Most of the time it's like, oh, this dragon is attacking us. Please kill it. You won't be dealing with white dragons very often, aside from as the big bad of the situation, of this minor arc. Now, of course, another option in story is a great knight has forced a white dragon into subservience. Now that creates some interesting dynamics. How does this dragon treat the knight? How does this knight compare up to the players? If this knight has taken... there's connotations when a knight has taken a white dragon, depending on age, as its subservient. Is it a young dragon? Well, this means he's obviously stronger than a young dragon. Much stronger than a young dragon. Is the dragon now adult? Maybe there's an opportunity to turn the tables. Players can sick him onto the knight. Of course, the last option that I see as the basic easy route for white dragons is you're serving the white dragon. You guys are a level 1 party out in the north, sworn your subservience. Now it sends you on missions to hunt those who it's taken vengeance, bring me those who have harmed me, swift death to my enemies. Of course, that's more of your evil route, and players will eventually outgrow this dragon. You're not going to deal with white dragons. Most of the time, that's very much what I'm getting at. You won't deal with white dragons. White dragons will deal with you. I encourage these guys as a type of random encounter. If you're in the north and if you're in the winter, and for some reason you roll up a dragon and you're like, oh, I don't want that kind of dragon. I don't want that dragon. He'll just talk to them. Okay, that honestly, talkative dragons are fun road encounters. But if you want a straight, open combat encounter, can't go wrong with a white dragon. It'll attack. It'll attack readily, especially if one of the players kind of looks like they might be an enemy. Again, animalistic. Let's talk and of course we get into combat. Now, there are 4 different dragons in combat, 4 different scaling levels of difficulty, which means you can run them at any level. The lowest is a CR2. Of course, it's usually not alone. Of course, it's about the dragon wormling. Now, the white dragon wormling, sorry if you're watching video and I'm looking away. I'm just adjusting this because I've got that screen on that side. The white dragon wormlings, armor class 16, tough armor class for level 2. 32 hit points, pretty good. That's a lot of hit points. 30 feet, burrow 15 feet, fly 60 feet, swim 30 feet. It can do a lot. It can move. That's the thing. This dragon can move. The most interesting thing about the speed of this dragon is the burrow. Not many creatures have the burrowing ability, which means it can hide from combat. It can duck into the ground and hide, and I actually encourage wormlings to do that, to try to flee the fight, get out of sight where people can't follow it. Now, these are medium creatures, 5x5. This is what players would see in, like, if they're invading a nest or if they're investigating a lair that has recently been dug out. It has some saving throws. Its stats are pretty average. 14 strength, 10 dex, 14 con, 5 intelligence. 5 intelligence is so low. Now, keep in mind, 4 intelligence is sentience. So a white dragon wormling is barely sentient. Because of that, this thing will attack mercilessly. It'll attack quickly. it'll try to run. It is just going to be an animal. This thing is just an animal. Now, it can speak Draconic, but you got to remember its other aspects. Greedy, superior. Great. This is the time when the players could feasibly take a white dragon as a captive. Blind sight 10 feet, dark vision 60 feet, passive perception 14. Hard to sneak up on at level. It'll be harder to sneak up on at level 2 as you get a higher, easier. Bite attack only 1d10 plus 2 piercing. Now, let's talk about that. Plus 1d4. Let's talk about that number real quick. 1d10 plus 2. So a maximum of 12 plus 1d4. So maximum of 16 damage on one hit. That hurts. That's like almost all of a tank's health at that level. If your party is going at this thing CR2, a wizard can't take a hit. A sorcerer can't take a hit. It's going to be animalistic, so it's going to go at the front lines. This is the time. This will not be your big bad. This is a time when you can have the tanks get in front of everybody. Of course, then again, it has its breath attack, which 5d8 damage, maximum of 40 damage on a save, with an average of 22. Only Constitution saving throw, so most of the time they're probably going to be taking, on average, about 11 damage if they succeed their save. But that is still a lot of damage, especially in AoE. That's going to hit an entire party. Now, I say this, dragons are not supposed to be easy fights. Dragons are not at an easy fight. I don't recommend throwing a white dragon wormling at your players at level 2. It will annihilate them. Maybe not annihilate them. They stand a decent chance of killing it, spell attacks, that kind of thing. The reason why I say it might annihilate them is that breath attack, man. 5d8 at level 2. If your players get a bad roll, you just annihilate them. And that's kind of how dragons go. If you get a bad roll against their breath attacks, you're probably toast. Or in this case, a block of ice ready to be eaten. Because white dragons like to eat their prey whole. Of course, wormlings, they're going to be young. They're not going to be very talkative, barely sentient. They do know Draconic, though. So what I would recommend as far as throwing this, maybe throw it at a level 3, maybe at a level 4. Let it be an easier encounter, or be able to throw them in multiple numbers. The thing about the white dragon wormling is it's the young blood. It's barely hatched. It's not out there hunting on its own. It's still in the nest. So if the players go in to kill a white dragon and they find a wormling in its nest, mama's coming. And that can be used as this kind of thing. Like I said, they scale in their complexity and in their difficulty. Because dragons scale that in that way, the white dragon tends to be the easiest to run and the easiest to fight. Because it's like, okay, this is straightforward. Attack. Straightforward. Attack. Breath weapon. Attack. Breath weapon. Attack. If it gets too low, flee. I highly encourage fleeing stuff, especially for sentient creatures. It's animalistic. If it cannot win the fight, it might run, especially this young. And it'll run for safety, either to its parent or, of course, to big brother, a young white dragon. Now, young white dragons might guard nests while its parents are out, but they also might be out starting layers of their own. Now, this is when they get additional abilities. For instance, since it's not a wormling, the young white dragon gains a bite attack. Its breath attack scales up. Its other stats also scale up. Now, the young white dragon gets 17 armor, 133 hit points, burrow of 20 feet. See, all of its stuff scales up from the wormlings. That's the thing. That's what's really nice about dragons and running them is they scale up. If you're going to throw a dragon at your players and you're like, this is going to wipe them out, take a step down. Be like, okay, I can't run an adult dragon against them. I can run a young dragon. And maybe you just give them some abilities. Maybe it's a young dragon on the verge of adulthood. That's the thing. Because of the scaling nature of dragons, you have a bunch of stats to go between. If you think that a young dragon is going to be too easy, you can scale it up. You can cut the difference between an adult dragon and a young dragon. You can be like, okay, maybe it gets additional cold breath, maybe it gets additional damage to its claws, additional attacks. We give it one of the abilities of it. That's the thing. It's infinitely scalable. But you're like, okay, this is the top, this is the bottom. As long as my dragon falls Sorry, this is the top, this is the bottom. As long as my dragon falls somewhere in this scale, we'll be fine. And run it like that. I highly recommend you run it like that. So in this case, the young white dragon, 17 AC, 133 hit points, 18 strength, 10 dex, 18 constitution, 6 intelligence, 11 wisdom, 12 charisma. Not much has changed there. It's strength and con went up. Strength and con are the big numbers for this dragon. The big numbers for the dragon are strength and con. And of course, I would definitely run them like that. So what I would do, the young white dragon, it bites. It knows more. It's intelligent. It's not as intelligent, that much more intelligent than the young dragon. I mean, than the wormling, but it's a little bit. It's got 2 additional intelligence points, which means it might know how to flee. It might know when to flee. It might be able to know enough to target that armor is hard to chew through, and maybe it's time to attack somebody else. See, the strategies also shift. When you go from a wormling to a young dragon, now the young dragon go, see, I remember biting armor one day. That's pretty tough. I've seen somebody in plate. They are chunky. But that guy in the robes? Ooh, they're tasty. And rush the wizard. You're dealing with intelligent creatures. Dragon fights are always going to be difficult. Dragon fights are always going to be potentially lethal. I would just remember that when you're running them. Now, of course, it gains the ability Ice Walk. Now, it can move across, climb icy surfaces without needing to make an ability check. Difficult terrain of ice and snow doesn't cost extra movement. That's great. It's just, it can move on ice now. And so when it starts attacking, it'll attack in snow. It'll use that snow to its advantage. It can start using these things to advantage. It won't use it super effectively. It's not out here making complex strategy of pit traps underneath the ice and snow. It's not planning to jump out, but it can burrow into the snow. It can wait for prey. It can burst out of the snow, surprising the enemy and getting the jump on them. Of course, it also gained the common language, so the dragon can now insult you in common and talk about how weak you are in common. Again, white dragons are just a scaled-up wormling. Now, adult white dragons are where you're going to see the most stuff. Now, the adult white dragons, this is where we think, when we talk about how scary dragons are, we're talking about these guys. We're talking about the adult dragons. The adult and the ancient dragons. Because the adult dragon, whoo, boy, does it get spicy. Not only do they gain Ice Walk, but they gained additional abilities. They gained additional attack. They gained legendary actions. This is the point when we are talking about a fight with a dragon. Unfortunately, it's only got an intelligence of 8. Everything's scaled up. Con, strength are still its abilities. Wisdom has gone up a little bit. Its charisma is there. But it still is dumb as a box of rocks. How I scale intelligence, and I like the scaling of intelligence. Let me know what kind of intelligence scaling you use. 8 to 12 is human intelligence, which means this is average human intelligence. This is on the low end of average. If you take average as being the middle, say 10, this is maybe a jump lower. Because of that, it's not going to be complex in its strategies, but it can make basic strategies. That's the benefit. Basic strategies. It can trap prey. It can attack them. It has the combat experience to know, okay, he's squishy, he's not. That looks like a spellcaster, that doesn't. When we're talking about age, you've got to understand, when we're talking about white dragons, the scaling for white dragons, and dragons as a whole, is a wormling is 5 years or less. A young dragon is up to 100 years. An adult dragon has lived for at least 100 years and up to 800 years. Because of that scaling, an adult white dragon has at least 100 years of experience in hunting. It's probably gone up against some adventurers. It knows what armor looks like. It knows what a spell looks like. It knows when it's about to get hit by a fireball. And it knows to stay out of the way. It knows to burrow down to attack. Again, it has a burrow of 30 feet. Now, this is where it also gets tricky because These multi-attacks can be nasty as its frightful presence. So how I recommend running these guys is, again, it's either going to attack from cliff tops or it's going to attack from the earth. If it has the jump on the enemy, it's going to attack from the earth. It's going to come up under the from under the ice, pop out of the earth, surprise the enemy, immediately hit them with a frightful presence and a cold breath. Because it's going to have a surprise round. An adult white dragon, probably, if the players are not aware it's there, will probably wind up with a surprise round, which means this fight gets bad fast. A smart white dragon is not the most smart, but it knows enough to burst out, and it knows how to use its own abilities. So it immediately pops out, uses its frightful presence, or immediately breath attacks him. Now, reason why I say it immediately goes on the attack. You don't reason with these things. It's hunting prey. You're in its territory. You are its prey, and it will hunt you. It can move across icy surfaces. Now, it's going to attack with its breath. I'm going to give the warning here. Dragons are TPK as a whole. Always TPK. A dragon will TPK. It wants the treasure. It wants whatever you're carrying. If it has the opportunity to kill, it will kill. If it sees you playing whack-a-mole, it'll kill the wizard. Kill the healer. It has enough intelligence to pick who its target is. Oh, you're doing some weird stuff. I better kill you. Oh, you're a spellcaster. Better kill you. It's not gonna make intricate strategies, but it can make a basic strategy. Again, its stuff is less about all of it. It has so much to it. Again, the complexity of the fight comes down to it. When you get into it, the biggest difference between this and the other dragons is its legendary actions and its a legendary resistance. Because all it gains is a couple more attack actions. It's stronger, heavier armor, a lot more health. It's a tankier version of the other dragons. That's how dragons work. Each version is tankier than the last, but gains some more abilities. It gains legendary actions. That's the big thing. The legendary resistance stop it from failing saving throws. A white dragon might realize, like, okay, I need to save those for when I'm potentially going to get stunned or paralyzed or anything like that. And then it's legendary actions. The reason why it pops out and uses its breath attack instead of immediately going at one person, because as soon as somebody goes at him, well, legendary actions. It makes a tail attack. It makes a wing attack. And it can do that. Of course, it doesn't have to be within that creature. So if the tank runs up immediately to the dragon, it's catching either 3 tail attacks, or it's catching a wing attack and a tail attack before the start of the dragon's next turn, and then the dragon is annihilating the thing. This thing is going to dish out damage. It's going to be a damage sponge. 200 health is nothing to sneeze at. It's not as high as other creatures at this level. Players will be able to tear through this thing pretty quickly. My players can probably kill this thing alone in a round or two. But adult white dragons hunt alone. That's why I say they're great for a random encounter. They slow down the party. Maybe they destroy the cart they're traveling in. Maybe they kill the horses. It's like the adult dragon coming into the territory doesn't necessarily need to be the big bad. If they're kind of in the territory, it can be. But again, this is the weakest of the dragons. Like I said, my party could annihilate this thing in 2 turns. I've got a guy who deals 80 damage a turn, which means this guy's going to see that kind of warrior and keep its distance. It's going to take 1 group of hits and back off. That's another benefit of these creatures, that 80-foot flying speed. It'll stay at a distance if it's available to. It'll keep its distance. Let it keep its distance. Maybe it comes into attack with its cold breath. And if it gets hurt, it will flee. Let this thing flee. Don't make it fight to the death. It's not a genius, but it's smart enough to know, I'm outmatched here. I need to go. Of course, a step up from the adult white dragon is our ancient dragon. Now, ancient dragons, oh boy, normally ancient dragons are a lot stronger than this. This is where the weakest of the dragons comes in. Yeah, normally ancient dragons are a lot weaker than this. Now, I'm not calling this thing weak, but this is because it is a CR20. This thing is a mean little thing. It's got this same thing. The only difference is it did not gain anything. Most ancient dragons gain spellcasting. That's what makes them so dangerous. That's why ancient dragons aren't usually CR20. They're usually like CR23, CR24. Ancient dragons don't gain spellcasting normally. Ancient dragons normally do gain spellcasting. Of course, they've got their lair actions to beef them up a little bit. They've got their regional effects to help block areas off and make it more difficult to get to them. But compared to other dragons, this thing is so weak. It's just a scaled up young dragon. All the strategies you used with the young dragon now work for this thing. It's going to burrow from the ground. It's going to attack from there. It's going to keep its distance. It's going to wait for its cold breath to recharge. Then burst in at 80 feet of movement, blast the entire party with a 90-foot cone, hope it survives the round, and then leaves. Again, that's a lot of damage. This is not a tough dragon. Only AC of 20. When you're comparing this thing, if you ever want a weaker dragon to throw at your players, or a stat block for something that your players are supposed to beat in a trial, and it's supposed to simulate a dragon, a white dragon is your best bet. Because a white dragon is easy compared to the other dragons. It's not a spellcaster. Now, of course, if you really wanted to beef up an ancient white dragon, say your party's a lot more powerful, of course, you can do the usual things. Scale up its health, scale up its AC, scale up its damage. Give it some spells. That's all you gotta do. Give it some spells. I'm like, that's the only difference between why this thing is weaker than other dragons, is it does not gain spellcasting. Honestly, white dragons, compared to other dragons, are the fairest dragons in a fight. They're straight on. Sure, they'll try to ambush you. They might wait until the camp decides to take a rest for the night, catch them by surprise. It's got no honor. It's not going to talk to them. But like I said, it's the most straightforward. It's the most fair. It's going to breath attack the allies. There's no talking to it. Once it's arrived, it's kill or be killed. Which also means dealing with it as your party. When you throw a white dragon, if you expect your party to murder this thing, just murder whatever you're going to throw at them. Throw a white dragon in front of them, because the white dragon will be taken down. If they take down a white dragon, sure, it comes with great bragging rights, but people go, that's the weakest of the dragons. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. Bringing down an ancient white dragon is still a big deal. But if there's an ancient silver dragon in the area, it's going, he was kind of an annoyance. When you're comparing their stat blocks, this is the weakest. And remember that when you're running them. Let your players have their fun. If you want your players to have this action-packed attack with a white dragon, and you want this dragon encounter where they go in and feel like the heroes, throw this at them. It'll be the easiest fight for you to run. It'll be the easiest fight for them to perform. Now, we've got some things in the works. We have been gone for a little while. Game Masters Arsenal has been off for a bit. Things in the fall take a shift turn. We've started streaming a lot more. If you made it this far, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, do whatever you got to do. Of course, hit that follow. We are on Twitch as well. You can catch us on Twitch. We live stream Return to Moria and some other adventure games. Of course, we've also started live streaming our D&D sessions. And I will give a taste of that later. For now, we'll catch you guys next week. I think that's where we're going to leave it tonight. Thank you guys for playing.